good to be here in this moment. If you're not fully here yet, I invite you to enter the present moment with your attention instead of being absorbed in your thinking. And that simple thing is a shift in consciousness. How do I enter the present moment? Somebody is thinking right now. I can't get out of my head. An easy way is to direct your attention to sense perceptions, whatever you see and hear at this moment, and become a little bit more alert and go, oh, there's an alertness that rises and that heightens your sense perceptions, auditory, visual, and you suddenly become conscious of your surroundings. And you might notice that your once usual state, well, not yours because you're all advanced spiritual practitioners, but other people's usual state is they're hardly here. They're only present enough not to bump into furniture. Whatever is happening around them is peripheral to their attention. And a huge amount of their attention is continuously absorbed by thinking. And a lot of that is actually not terribly relevant to anything. But it pretends to be extremely important. Every thought has this seductive quality to it. It wants to draw you in. It has a pull like a magnet. And if you follow each thought, it'll take you, you're at the mercy of whatever arises in your mind, and you live like that. What a terrible existence. And you go drawn this way and that way. And then after a few years, you can see it in your face. Your face becomes very tense. And there's no longer a light shining through your eyes. Because all the consciousness is being devoured by the mind. And that's a dreadful state. It's been like this for a long, long time, many thousands of years. And that really, your entire sense of who you are, which is the most vital thing to know who you are. This is why the ancient dictum at the oracle in Delphi says, know yourself. And one of a very important meditation recommended by, for example, Ramana Maharshi and other teachers is the question, who am I? So your sense of who you are when you are completely identified with every thought that comes into your head, a lot of it negative, by the way, because negative thoughts are more seductive than positive thoughts. You can think about an unpleasant person who did something to you yesterday, or said something, or failed to say something, or failed to do something, or should have done something. You can think about that for a long time, but you can't think that much about a beautiful sunset. You go, okay. So all the things that make life worth living actually involve less thinking. For joy to come into your life, a moment of joy, you go, ah. And you might not realize that in that moment there is a space that opens up inside you when you are not thinking but not falling asleep either. There's just a space of alertness. And that is really already a glimpse that is what in Zen they call satori, which is a flash of enlightenment, a flash, a momentary realization. Beauty, to recognize beauty anywhere, for a moment, the thinking mind needs to subside and a little bit of space opens up and you go and then you truly look. And you might not notice it, but for a few seconds, you're not thinking. If you're thinking, you're not really seeing. You can say, oh, that's a lovely flower. I wish I had that in my garden. But you're not really seeing it. To really see it, there needs to be a moment of alert presence in which thinking subsides. Oh, there it is. And that's how beauty reveals itself to you. And that's how joy arises. And that's how any feeling that is empathy with another human being. You cannot arrive at empathy or compassion through the judgmental mind. There needs to be a space within you that opens up and you can look at another human being without any conceptualization in your head. You look at them and you sense something in them that is deeper than their psychological makeup. But there is a presence. It can only be realized through the presence within you. So that is the dimension within you without which your life, you're not really truly alive. Or as Confucius would say, you're not fully human yet. If that dimension has not yet arisen in you, has not revealed itself to you, you are just on your, yes, of course, you are on your way. Everybody's on their way to becoming fully human, but you're not quite there yet. And some people are so deeply trapped in their minds that they live in a completely conceptualized universe where every human they meet, they immediately judge. And they take entire groups of humans and judge them. And so they dehumanize them, and this is how violence can happen. You total loss of empathy. You no longer know what you're doing. You no longer know what you're doing to other humans. We all know from recent events. Last week, people asked, how is it possible that humans can perpetrate such atrocities? Well, they are possessed by certain thoughts. In your head, they have taken over their minds. They're called religious thoughts, nothing to do with anything. It's not true religion, it's an ideology. It is a viral infection, so to speak, of your mind. Thoughts can act like viruses if you're not careful. They can take over completely. So a few groups of thoughts possess your entire mind and control everything is seen through that viral infection in your mind, to use that analogy. And it's an amazing thing. So these are extreme ways, but millions are suffering from that, not perhaps as an extreme way as the terrorists, but millions are experiencing symptoms of that kind, lesser symptoms of the same disease. So to know yourself for most people means it's an identification with certain images in their mind. First of all, there's the image, I am this physical body, and then what is it that people derive their sense of identity from, the sense of who they are. Usually it's their physical appearance and then the inner world of their thoughts, accompanied by emotions. And lots of very heavy emotions are created by dysfunctional thinking. We all know that, and in the past, before you spiritually awakened, you experienced that also. So there is a vast dimension in yourself that is, now, let's call it the transcendent dimension of who you are. There where the person or the personality that you usually identify with, that usually gives you your sense of self, which consists of self-talk, basically. The habitual self-talk in the head explains to you who you are. And it takes on board what others tell you who you are. It starts with what your mother might have told you who you are, and your siblings and parents and your environment and your culture tells you who you are. And this is absorbed by the mind, and then it becomes your story. And then that becomes the foundation for your sense of identity. This is where you derive your sense of self from. So it's a conceptualized, because thoughts are concepts, a conceptualized sense of self. It's not, and then it attempts to make itself feel a little better by adding more concepts to your mind. They might be possessions. Maybe if I get more possessions, I can feel better about myself. Maybe if I find the right person who is going to make me happy, then my life will be fine. But these are all really concepts. Even the big house or the big car gets translated into a concept in your mind, and then you identify with it, and it becomes part of the sense of me. But always uneasy and never enough. And never satisfied for very long. And always things seem to go wrong. The Buddha already recognized that. He said, wherever you go and whatever you do, you'll find dukkha, which is translated traditionally as suffering, but can also be translated as misery or unhappiness or unsatisfactoriness. So on that level, you can never be satisfied for very long. If you don't know who you are, but you're trying to enhance that mind-made sense of self. So the most important dimension, one could say you only know one half of yourself, and that half is who you are on the level of form, physical form and the psychological form of me. And that's how most people live their lives, and they don't know what they are missing. Now, spiritual people have the idea that there is such a thing as a state of enlightenment that can be reached at some point. Many Buddhists believe that a few more incarnations are definitely needed, but then perhaps I will eventually get there. So it is made into some idea in the head that I need to reach, and not realizing that that dimension, which we could call the spiritual dimension, which we could call the transcendent dimension, or which we could call who you really are, that is always already there. That is already present here and now. And why do some people not know it? Because they are continuously, completely overlooking it. Because the movement of thought plus the emotions that go with it has an enormous seductive quality, that it hypnotizes you into continuously identifying with form that arises. And every thought is a thought form, and every emotion that arises is an emotional, it's not a physical form, but it's an energy formation. Every thought is an energy formation, and every emotion is an energy formation. You cannot see it, but you can feel it, and it affects the body in certain ways. So those things continuously absorb your attention, and there's something very vital that you overlook, and that is something deeper without which you couldn't even think. There would be no thought, there would be no sense perception. So what you then overlook is the presence, the formless presence of consciousness itself, which is always there. If you stop thinking for 3 seconds, there it is. Where? Because if you look for it as if you could say, there it is, you'll never find it. So if you look for enlightenment as if it could be something that arises and you can say, there it is, and now I have it, then you will never find it, because that's not how you cannot grasp it. Now let's bring this to what really matters right now. Can you sense that apart from any thoughts that may be going through your head right now, hopefully not many, maybe none, there is also in you the dimension of simple, formless presence. To get you there, I could ask you the question, what does it really feel like to be you right now? What is that feeling of, what does it feel like to be you? Now, when I say you, I don't mean your personal history. You don't have to remember that for this practice. What does it, something deeper that has never left you, that's always been there and always will be there, what does it feel like? Can you sense the presence that you are that has nothing to do with your personal history at all? There is simply the light of presence. And meditation, of course, is supposed to get you there, but you can, at any moment, you can be aware of it. How? Not by making it an object of your attention. That doesn't work. Because that awareness or that consciousness that is the essence of who you are, when you're looking for it and you go, okay, I'm looking for that great experience, the alertness behind the looking is it. So if you're looking for yourself, if you're looking for the enlightened version of yourself at some future moment, you are missing that the very consciousness that becomes the looking, if you could catch it at a slightly earlier stage, where it's just pure consciousness, is it already. So if you can know yourself as consciousness, as the presence, then you realize the hidden dimension of life, or the transcendent dimension. I sometimes call that the other half. It's not only a way of speaking. It's not, you can't divide life into two halves. But temporarily, just to help us approach this, to see for a moment that your life consists of the life of form, physical form, mental form, but also of inner presence. In the same way, I could use an analogy of this room. If you wanted to investigate what is the essence of this room here, and you start looking at the people in it, maybe in this analogy, the people are the thoughts in your mind, and then you're looking at the furniture and the walls and the ceiling and everything. Okay, I'm trying to get to the essence of this room. And then you can even analyze with microscopes. Maybe it's hidden in the carpet. Maybe with a telescope. Maybe if I get my binoculars, maybe it's on that wall somewhere. And you miss the one thing that pervades the entire room, which is the space of this room. So if you could pay attention to the space of this room, you would get the essence. Without the space, the room means nothing. It couldn't even exist. And we're using an analogy here that there is a spaciousness within you that is continuously missed because you're so interested in the furniture in your head. And for many people, their mind is crammed full with furniture. You can't even move anymore. And here comes another thought, and then here comes this. No space, and the loss of spaciousness is the most terrible loss in life, because then joy, real joy, cannot arise anymore. Love, which is a sense of true connectedness with another, that all arises from a little bit of spaciousness inside you. Sometimes people become spacious for 3 seconds when they see a dog. That's why I have this book about dogs and cats. You see a dog and you look at into the eyes of a dog, and you go, it feels good. People love dogs, except people who don't, but most people most people seem to love dogs, and they are drawn to them because for a moment it frees you from your mind, because you know that the dog has no judgments about you. It has neither good, it just looks at you and the tail wags. And for a moment it can free you of your mind for a few seconds, and that's why it feels so good to look at the dog and say, oh, lovely dog. And for a moment there's just a connectedness. With humans, much more difficult. Because the moment you meet another human, there's judgments, and you can sense that, except those humans who are no longer dominated by their mind, and they can meet you in that openness of presence. And they just look, and you know they're not judging you. But this means those humans who don't judge you, they haven't fallen back to the level of consciousness of the dog. The dog, in a way, is in that beautiful state of connectedness with being, because the dog has not yet been totally seduced by thinking. But for us, we cannot go back. We have to go forward. We have to rise above thinking, not fall below thinking. So here, the arising of presence is an evolutionary leap that humanity is now, we are beginning to enter this evolutionary shift where humans reach a new stage in evolution, which is a complete inner change where thinking still operates. It's transcended, which means it isn't left behind completely. It is transcended so that you are no longer a thought-based entity, you are a presence-based entity. So you're no longer dominated by thought, and it's only then that your thinking can actually be used in a powerful and constructive way. It's a wonderful tool to use your mind positively, to create. It's an instrument, a miraculous instrument. It only becomes insane when it takes you over and there's no space of awareness anymore. So if you then derive your sense of identity from the presence within you, and more you become comfortable with spaces of not thinking. Oh, you can walk from one building to another, or from the building to your car, and just be in that state of alert presence. It's beautiful. You see beauty everywhere. You don't need to label everything anymore. That compulsion to label everything is the egoic mind. It doesn't operate anymore, and that's an enormous burden falls away when you can go through life. You don't need to judge everything. There is a deeper knowing there that is not conceptual. And so one of the great spiritual practices is a very simple one, and that is practice not labeling or interpreting what you are perceiving. And that you can practice anywhere, wherever you are. I always recommend do it when you're waiting for something somewhere, because you'll be amazed how much time we spend waiting for things. Waiting at the traffic light, waiting at the checkout counter, waiting at the airport, waiting. Many people are waiting their entire lives because they're waiting to start living. And then they reach 70 and say, was that it? I'm still waiting. I haven't started living yet. Awful. So use waiting instead of waiting. Just bring an alertness, invite that state of alertness in, and you go, oh, why? There's nothing wrong with waiting, because you always either stand, sit, or lie somewhere. Does it really matter where you stand, sit, or lie? But But the mind says, I shouldn't be waiting at this checkout counter. Why is this person so inefficient? Why is he talking to this customer? She shouldn't be talking to him. She should be doing her job. And you can discover that in yourself and suddenly say, I choose something different.
He's pretty good at it.
The discovery of your mind, what your mind is doing to you, is an enormous step forward in evolutionary terms.
Yeah.
The discovery of how your mind functions. I thought they'd shut me off. They will in a minute. It implies there is already that awareness arising in you, where you become aware of what your mind is doing. It's an enormous thing. So the shift then, you can use waiting periods instead of complaining, just being present. Feel the presence that you are, the alertness. And at that moment, you become a spiritual master. Because all that differentiates a person who is not yet awake from a spiritual master is that the spiritual master can be in the state of presence, which is complete alignment with the present moment without complaining about anything. Just is. That's the Zen master. He goes, this is what is. What are you complaining about? And this is why there was a Zen master who would never answer any questions. All he would ever do when people asked him questions about the meaning of Zen was he would raise his finger and look at you. Can you explain the meaning of Zen, please? Did you hear what I said? Did you hear my question? He's simply teaching presence. Alert presence. That's Zen, nothing else. And people spend years in Zen monasteries and they still don't get it. Because they think, I need to understand something. The Course in Miracles says, your understanding is not a powerful contribution to the truth. Now, the miracle is when you give up the need to understand yourself, my life, I need to figure out my life. What is your life? It's a mental construct. So you're trying to figure out a mental construct that you call my life, and it's very complex. I need to figure out what it's all about, where am I going, what am I doing? Why not give up the need to understand and just invite presence in? And then it looks for a moment, from the point of view of the mind, as if you didn't know anything anymore. And you don't, not conceptually. So you voluntarily enter that state of not knowing, and then you realize, out of that state of not knowing, a deeper knowing arises, and a deeper sense of connectedness with life, and a deeper sense of connectedness with other humans and all life forms. And that is the awakening and the shift in consciousness. And now I'm handing this chair over to Deepak.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Thank you. I'll call you back.
I'm going to fix your microphone right now. Looks like that fell off there.
So, right this moment, as you're about to listen to me, just turn your attention to who's listening. So, as you're looking at me, turn your attention to who's looking. That's you. Okay. That you has always existed. It was there when you were a baby. It was there, a different body, different mind. It was there when you were a teenager, different body, different mind. It's there now. And actually, if you stay with it, without anyone explaining to you, you'll realize that it's that timeless being in which time is born. Time is just the movement of thought. Time is the movement of thought that creates a subject-object split. Me, Deepak, Eckhardt, okay, all of you. That's a thought. That's a thought. And it is the movement of thought is not in observer in the midst of time-bound observation. So as Eckhart said, you can spend your whole life studying scripture and spend your whole life in various practices, and it does help. It takes time for a fruit to ripen, but then one day it falls, and the falling can be quite sudden, as in your case it was. Transcendence is simply going beyond the subject-object split, which is artificial. It's not real. Nature and the universe is a single process. So the subject-object split is an artificial split. And it is the cause of every single problem that we know. So I come from a tradition which is called Vedanta, which you referred to when you mentioned Sri Ramana Maharshi. And Buddha came many years later and actually did refine in his own language the teachings of Vedanta. But in the Vedanta there are what are called the 5 kleshas. The klesha is a Sanskrit word which means the cause of suffering. So the 5 kleshas are, number 1, not knowing who you are. Number 2, the addiction and the craving for permanence in a world that is inherently impermanent. Number 3 is the fear of impermanence. Number 4 is identifying with your self-image instead of yourself. What Eckhart was saying, all the labels. So all the labels, all the definitions, all the evaluations, all the judgments, all the ideas, all the concepts that have come from conditioning, parents, children, your parents, your siblings, your culture, religion, history, economic conditions, all these things are collected and then identified with, and that becomes the self-image, the conditioned mind. So that's the 4th klesha. And the 5th klesha is the fear of death, is the fear of the unknown. It's the fear that actually is the basis of all religion, at least institutionalized religion, capitalizes on the fear of death. And in a way, all fear is the fear of death in disguise. Because what is the fear of death? It's, as I said, the fear of the unknown, but it's also the fear of, I'm trying to hold on to something that's not going to be there in the next moment. Okay? Because in the real world, we do not have objects. In the real world, objects do not exist. That's a perceptual artifact. Okay? There's only process. Only process. A simple way of saying this is that there are no nouns, only verbs. The universe is a verb. It's an activity. And being an activity, it never stops. Okay, so when, even as you're looking at me or yourself, your body or your mind, your body is constantly changing. Actually, even scientifically, the body that you have right now is not the body that you walked in with a little while ago. Because you're breathing, you're thinking, you're taking in information from the world, you have relationships, you eat, you eliminate. All these processes are constantly the flux of your physical body. So, as I said, the body you walked in with is not the body that you have right now. And of course, in less than a year, every single atom in your body has been replaced, recycled. You don't have the same body you had as a kid, as a baby, as a teenager. So if you think you're your body, you have a little bit of a dilemma. Which one are you talking about? And if you think you're your mind, you also have a dilemma because the mind is changing all the time. And so here we go, bamboozled by the idea that things exist. Things don't exist. Only process exists. Nouns are conventions of language. They are not facts of reality. It's a language convention. There's no noun. Not even this microphone is not a noun. It has a little longer shelf life, though, than the body and the mind. But there are no nouns. So all the suffering comes from nouns, things, which don't exist. Okay. So we go over those 5 kleshas, not knowing who you are, trying to fix the flux, which won't be fixed, afraid of the flux, identifying with ideas instead of who you are, ideas about yourself, as you said, and the fear of death. And the great teaching of the Vedanta is that all these 5 causes of suffering are contained in the first cause. And that is not knowing you, who you are. Confusing yourself with a socially induced hallucination that actually doesn't exist. And the key, therefore, is who am I? I mean, Sri Ramana Maharshi spent 20 years in silence, and if people asked him a question, no matter what the question was, he would say, who's asking the question? And sometimes he would say, not only who's asking the question, but who's the who that is asking the question? And you know, when you say, who am I, then you could also ask yourself, who's asking, who am I? And if you go a little bit deeply into that, you'll come to the place that Eckhardt was talking about. That who is asking the question is a transcendent being that is neither the subject of experience nor the object of experience. So very frequently we say, I'm the observer, but even that is not correct. Okay? the observer and the observed, me and the other, simultaneously co-arise as the movement of thought. The real you is neither the observer nor the observed, but in which both the observer, the subject, and the object of experience simultaneously arise and simultaneously subside. And they're doing so in every moment. That's the flux. Okay, it's a flux that is constantly creating a subject and object. But the real being is neither the subject or the object. It's where the subject and object arise like waves on the ocean and subside. So before a wave arises, it's water. As a wave, it's water, and when it subsides, it's water. It doesn't lose its wateriness. And that's being. You are the being in which thought arises and subsides. Now that thought can have many qualities, okay? These qualities of thought are referred to in the consciousness literature, they're referred to as qualia. Now, everybody has heard these days, thanks partly to my obsession with quanta, okay? Quanta. What is quanta? It means quantity. Okay, so quantum physics is the study of quantities of units of mass and energy. It's the smallest indivisible unit of information and energy is a quanta. But remember, quanta are units of measurement. Qualia, on the other hand, are units of thought or qualities of consciousness. And there are usually just 4 of them. Anytime you have any experience, you're either experiencing a sensation somewhere, or you're experiencing an image, or a feeling, emotion, or a thought. You know, Dan Siegel, who's a great friend of ours, is a neuropsychiatrist at UCLA. He says he uses an acronym, SIFT, S-I-F-T. Every experience that you have is either a sensation, or an image, or a feeling, or a thought. All of perceptual experience, all of cognitive experience, or any experience is actually just consciousness and its qualities. Okay, so right now I'm experiencing you as image and sensation in my body, in my consciousness. I experience my own body like that. I experience you like that. Sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts are occurrences in consciousness of consciousness. So even though I see this as mine and your body as different than mine, actually what I'm experiencing as you and what I'm experiencing as my body are just sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. And the whole universe is nothing other than that. Consciousness experiencing itself as the subject and the object, but both the subject, the individual subject, and the individual object are movements of consciousness within consciousness. Okay, so that's why the great sayings of the great rishis is that I'm not in the world is in me. I'm not in the body is in me. I'm not in the mind is in me. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, when he's talking to Arjuna, he says, Prakritim swam vashtbhai vishrajami puna puna. Curving back within myself, I create again and again. It's the mechanics of how we create our experience of the body, we create our experience of the mind, and we create our experience of the world. If we totally understand that and come back to what Eckhardt was saying, that you can't find this presence by looking for it, because it's the one that's looking. Okay? You can't find consciousness by looking for it, because consciousness is the one that's looking. You know, in my field, as a person who's trained in neuroscience, biology, endocrinology, today there's a lot of interest in consciousness as a brain phenomenon, because that's how we are trained. We think consciousness is a perceptual object, but where is the brain experience? When you think about the brain, where is that experience? In consciousness. When you look at a brain as a perceptual object, that's also in consciousness. So consciousness is prior to brain. Okay? Even the experience of the brain is, the perceptual experience of the brain is a qualia. It's a quality of consciousness within consciousness. So coming back to what he was saying, is all this neuroscience that we're doing, which is fun, a lot of fun to do, it's very inferential, but we will never understand consciousness by looking at a brain or through neuroscience. Why? Because only consciousness can know consciousness. Only consciousness can understand consciousness. Only consciousness can experience consciousness. Any neuroscience validation of consciousness is inferential. It's not direct. Direct is the presence, this moment. So when I started, I said, as you're listening to me, turn your attention to who's listening. Or as you're looking at me, just turn your attention to the space between you and me. Presence is always there. It gets overshadowed, as Eckhardt was saying, by the furniture. You know, Rumi has a very beautiful poem. He says, "Who am I in the middle of all this thought traffic?" Because there's the center of being in which all the traffic is happening. And we are obviously identifying ourselves with the furniture and the traffic instead of this presence around which the traffic is being generated as a result of self-interaction. The internal dialogue, as Eckhardt was saying, speaking to yourself. And that never stops, because we're so influenced by the quality of awareness which is always looking out there for ultimately what is called happiness or fulfillment. Okay, get the right job, I'll be happy. Get the right person, I'll be happy. Get a lot of money, win the lottery, I'll be happy. Get good health, I'll be happy. But realize what Eckhardt said earlier, all that is thought. Okay, all that is thought. If I do this. So before the thought arises, you're already happy. And after the thought subsides, you're exactly where you started from. Okay? Before a thought arises, you were at peace. Then the thought arose, then you did everything to fulfill that outcome of that thought, which we call desire. And at the end, you were back where you started from. Okay? Just like before the wave arises, it's the ocean, and after the wave subsides, it's back into the ocean. So that makes it very obvious that happiness or joy is the starting point. It's also the ending point. You know, what's that poem, T.S. Eliot? We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of our exploring is to arrive where we started from. At the end of our exploring is to arrive where we started from and know the place for the first time. So what Eckhardt was saying is, instead of searching, just actually go back to where you started from. It's a journey without distance. And when you realize that it's a journey without distance, you turn the quality of your awareness to being present. Now, it's very interesting. We can say this many times, and you can hear this, and you can go out, and then you get distracted. You get distracted. And then something happens at some point where you realize that you don't need to be distracted. You can be the timeless being in the midst of time-bound activity. You can be the hub around which the whole universe arises and subsides. Because the whole universe, by the way, is nothing but sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts within consciousness. Okay, so there's a very important Mahavakya. Mahavakya means big idea, and it's still an idea till you experience it in Sanskrit. Aham Brahmasmi. Aham means I am, Brahmasmi, the universe. Because that's the only identity we have. We are the totality of the universe, the totality of the universe, as the continuum of space-time events now. But that space-time events, the continuum, is just a flux. It's coming and going, coming and going. So we go back to the fifth klesha, the fear of death. People say, where do I go when I die? Okay. Let me ask you a question just now. What did you have for lunch today? What did you have for lunch? Salad? Where did you have lunch? Okay. Now, as I'm asking you a question, the memory is coming, right? And you can experience it as a sensation, image, feeling, or thought, right? Where was that before I asked you the question? Where was that experience before I asked you the question? Now, traditional neuroscientists will say, it was in my brain, but I work with the best neuroscientists, my colleague, collaborators, Rudy Tanzi at Harvard, the chief neuroscientist and geneticist at Mass General Hospital. I said, Rudy, next time you have a conference, and he had 150 of the best scientists. And I said, ask them, where is memory stored in a cellular level? Guess what? Not one of them could answer. Okay. We know that when I asked you that question, and before you said salad, that there was a memory somewhere, but we can't find it in the brain. Can't find it in the brain. Do you remember the house you lived in when you were a teenager? Can you see it now? So what are you seeing? You're experiencing sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, because those memories are associated with other memories. If I go inside your brain, do you think I'll find a picture of your house? Or do you think there's some neural network where there is salad? So what happened? When I asked you the question, a sensation, image, feeling, thought arose from consciousness, and then it subsided in consciousness. And that consciousness is transcendent. It doesn't exist in space-time. So where do we go when we die? Where that salad was before I asked you the question. Okay? We don't go anywhere because we are there all the time. Okay? In fact, every thought comes from there. Every memory comes from there. Every desire comes from there. Every bit of imagination comes from there. Insights, intuition, imagination, creativity, choice, all comes from there. And we have to be there in order to retrieve it. You retrieved it from your transcendent self. And being transcendent, it's not a space-time event. But as you actualized it, then there was a little space-time. Okay? Ramana Maharishi, when he was dying, people said, "We are going to miss you." He said, "But where am I going?" Okay? What we call the physical world is a quality of awareness within awareness. What we call the mental world is a quality of awareness within awareness. What we call the universe is a quality of awareness within awareness. And if you can just anchor yourself in that little space, the openness that Eckhardt was saying, it's your ticket to freedom. It's the ticket to freedom. Why? Because it's the you that never dies. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot shatter it, fire cannot burn it. It's eternal, it's unborn, because birth is a space-time event. It doesn't die, because death is a space-time event. A space-time event is part of the flux. So I think that's all I really want to say. Okay? Now, just 1 minute. You know, we do these retreats because sometimes people haven't sat down or been quiet for a long time, and it's almost impossible for them to be present, so the retreat helps in taking you there. In fact, I do retreats myself in silence. So about 2 years ago, I took the opportunity to go to a monastery in Thailand, in the north of Thailand, and we had a very interesting routine over there. Okay, and the routine was that first of all, we shaved our head and our eyebrows, and we were barefoot, and so it was, you know, everybody looked the same, and there was no social mask. Secondly, we had to go begging. It wasn't called begging, it was called the alms round, to find our food every day. And then, you know, people were so generous that we came back as if we had gone shopping to Whole Foods. And then we shared our meal, and 1 meal a day, and the rest of the time was spent in silence and observing impermanence. Because, you know, you soon realize that everything you're looking at is this flux, it's impermanent. And it had a very dramatic effect on all of us, because it threw us in the present moment in a very interesting way. And so when we were leaving, and the abbot, the senior abbot who was the head of the monastery, is about half my age, you know, and we were in silence most of the time, but, you know, in the evenings we had like 2 hours where we could talk to him, and he would ask me questions about quantum physics. And I realized he knew everything. There was nothing I couldn't tell him. He had never read a book. He'd never learned mathematics or anything, but he had the experience that it wasn't difficult to explain to him what I knew intellectually. And on the day we were leaving, we were all in his presence, and he had a very gracious presence, just like Eckhardt has. And he left us with 2 things, and I want to leave you with those 2 things, okay? The first is, and this is both scientific insight and real insight, okay? There are no boundaries. in the universe. Every boundary is conceptual. In reality, there are no boundaries. We create them, just like we create latitude and longitude for purposes of convenience. So if I say, meet me on 56th and Broadway on Tuesday at 6 p.m., now we've created an agreement for a boundary. But in reality, there are no boundaries at all. And the second thing, which you already know, is the present moment is the only moment that never ends. Okay, the situations and circumstances around the present moment will change, but the moment won't change. Because it's timeless, it's transcendent, it's eternal. So I'll leave you with what my abbot said to me. He said, the most important time in your life is now. The most important person in your life is the one you're with now. The most important activity in your life is the one you're involved with now. And if you do that, the unknown will become known to you. The unknown is actually known only in the present moment. And that ultimately will lead to the conquest of death. Because death happens in time. Only that which is born dies, but that which is never born cannot die. Okay? Thank you. I'm going to invite Eckhardt, please welcome. So by the way, thank you. By the way, in the spiritual literature and in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, they talk about supernormal powers. They're called siddhis. Have you heard the word siddhi? Siddhis are dormant potentials, the ability to see in the future, the ability to experience the past, know previous lifetimes, remote viewing, remote healing. And I'm experiencing a siddhi right now. And it says that Wayne Dyer is in this room. There he is. And you thought I wasn't psychic. So, I'm going to first have a conversation with Eckhardt, and then perhaps you can join us for a few moments. Okay, so Eckhardt, these questions have come through Facebook, and I picked up the ones that have come most frequently.
Can I just, before you were talking, you were in the Buddhist monastery in Thailand, and there's this Buddhist scripture that came to mind that is one of my favorite sutras. I don't remember what it's called. It's a famous sutra. The Buddha is supposed to have said it, but of course you never know. But it says, so the Buddha is speaking to the monks, so he says, there is, O monks, the unborn, the uncreated, the unmanifested. If there were not the unborn, the uncreated, and the unmanifested, there would be no escape from the born, the created, and the manifested.
That's beautiful. Even the idea of freedom is an idea. Beautiful. So, I actually think I know the answer to this, but this is for you. It says, can you describe... Can you describe your daily spiritual practices? Have they changed over the years?
Well, I don't, as you probably know, I don't have a practice as such, not a formal practice as a separate activity. from ordinary daily living, but what naturally arises a lot of the time is spacious awareness. So I sometimes say it's a humorous, meant to be taken humorously. It's my greatest achievement in life is that I don't need to think all the time anymore. And that makes life into a much more pleasant experience if you can be there just as the presence. And so it's the intensity as I experience it may sometimes varies. Sometimes presence can, in certain occasions, almost obliterate everything else. And at other times, it's always there's that space in the background. So it's hard to describe, but I'm sure you all know. You've already, almost all of you, have experienced it. If you're not yet permanently in presence, that's fine, but it is arising. So actually alignment with the present moment is, you could say, is my practice, but it's become second nature, so I can't call it practice anymore.
Okay, so I'd like to kind of say what my practice is, because I actually was a disciple of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi for many, many years, and he did, in fact, initiate me into the practice that we all do here. And after a while, I did realize that the practice was like a tool. And for me, I still do it because I'm so used to it. And besides that, sometimes, even though I ignore the thoughts, they give me great ideas, and I make a living by selling words. So I stay with the practice. Eckhart, how would you define happiness? Is being happy a realistic goal?
Is it a realistic goal? Well, it's partly a question of semantics, by which I mean what do we mean when we say happy? I personally don't use that term very much, but I know that, for example, Ramana Maharshi said, your true nature is happiness. Happiness is your true nature. So he uses that term in a particular way. I wouldn't use the word that much because for most people, in common usage, happiness is a high. You experience a high, and usually a temporary high. I'm so great. Yeah. God. And so it's you cannot be on a permanent high. So if you have a high, you also experience the low. Oh, I thought that was going to be it, but it wasn't it. So the term that I would use is spaciousness, joy, perhaps. It's that which makes the Buddha smile when you look at statues, the good ones of the Buddha. In the bad ones, he looks miserable. But in the good ones, there's just a hint of a smile on his lips. And why is the Buddha smiling? If you approach Buddhism from a purely intellectual viewpoint, in some universities they'll tell you that Buddhism is a life-denying religion because they don't really understand it, they only understand the statements. And Buddha said emptiness is the ultimate answer, which of course is true, but you cannot, if you've never had even a glimpse of emptiness, you will think it's life-denying. So the Buddha has a slight smile because no matter what the Buddha experiences, he experiences everything against the background of emptiness. Another word for which would be spaciousness, or another word for which would be stillness. There's always that stillness, and the Buddha is the stillness. The Buddha is rooted in the stillness, which is, when we use words, we create a duality, but the Buddha is the stillness. So that is really, I think when Ramana Maharshi used the term happiness, and I don't know whether it's even a correct translation from what he used in his native language, that is, I believe, what he pointed to. I personally would not use the term happiness. I don't know about you.
Well, in the Buddha's teaching, there are 4 qualities of consciousness that he calls divine. So the first is loving kindness. The second is joy, which is not happiness. Happiness is a thought, okay? Joy is without thought. The third is compassion. And the fourth is equanimity. And if you really think of these qualities of consciousness, they're actually, at a very primordial level, they are not thought, okay? None of them is thought. All these are very subtle ways of communion, which means me and the other is one, okay? So when Eckhardt said, happiness is high and lows, yeah, happiness is a melodrama in a way, and joy is not. Joy is essential. This question on Facebook: I'm an artist and drew inspiration for my work from the simple and genuine love that existed between me and my husband until I found out that he betrayed me. Now I feel like my core is empty and my creativity is dead. How do I inspire myself to dream and imagine again?
Well, that's a sad story, but it comes from it is, of course, it's a story, but as long as that is very real to you, there's suffering in it. And there's a way out. I'd like to point the way beyond that for this person. Your husband betrayed you, okay. Your husband is a human being, I assume. Now, I love that term, human being, because we have 2 words here. We have human and we have being. Now, that which the love in you, when you were in the presence of your husband, that which you loved in the husband was the same in you. It was the being quality of that human. And the human is the form as which that he assumes that form, and that form is imperfect. So when you don't know, when you bring them together, you think that that love was an illusion, but it was not. You just haven't recognized that there is the dimension of being in him and in you, and that's from that recognition love arose. But the mind mixes it up with the form, and the form is imperfect. And so because of that, now, because you have the thought, what you're telling yourself in your head is now blocking that deeper awareness. The story that you believe in your head, that you are telling yourself, is blocking the deeper awareness of being. And that is, once you recognize that, you can feel that love again, because that love is who you essentially are. And so, and then the possibility of forgiveness also arises. Your husband, you forgive the human and whatever unconsciousness the human manifested. But the real forgiveness cannot arise until you know yourself as the formless, no longer identify with what arises in the world of form. And then you can look through that, and forgiveness arises naturally.
Could we say that the husband is a human being, but he is also being human?
Yes.
What is the best possible outcome of a life that one could hope for? What should we strive to create for ourselves? Strive.
Well, the best and the one single worthwhile, truly worthwhile thing is to encounter, to realize, to discover transcendence in your life, so that you're no longer trapped in that narrow, personalized, form-identified, thought-identified sense of self. And if there's nothing to you but that the person, then life is a very frustrating business. And this is what the Buddha referred to when he used the term suffering. He said, whatever you do, wherever you go, you will encounter that. But he also pointed the way beyond. So there is the possibility of realizing your formless, true nature. And that begins with a gap between two thoughts. It begins this moment when your attention moves fully into this moment. Not just awareness of sense perceptions, but also, and this sounds a little strange, but it's key, awareness of awareness. So if you can be aware at this moment, not only of that which arises in your immediate sense experience or thoughts or emotional field, but if you can be aware, in language we always, of course, language always creates duality, so you have to make allowances for that. If you can be aware right now, it can only be realized now. If you can be aware that you are aware right now, in addition to things that you perceive, there is a space of awareness. That is what makes life worthwhile. And then when that arises and then becomes a living realization in you, that is really the one thing, as Jesus said, there's only one thing that truly matters. And then you have chosen that one thing. That's the Mary and Martha story in the Gospels, where Jesus said to Mary, you have chosen the one thing that really matters. Whereas Martha was running around, I have to think about this, do this, get this ready. There's one thing that truly matters. And then the rest of your life, what form it takes, is secondary. It will unfold beautifully. With, of course, comes, nothing is permanent, and you won't need to cling to things anymore and be afraid that they leave you. And, very important, you won't have expectations that the world is going to make you happy. This is a very fundamental thing that it's an error in their mind. They believe that the world somehow has the ability, if they could only engineer things in such a way that everything would just fit neatly into place, and at some point they can arrive at a place where the world is going to provide them with fulfillment. And of course advertising knows that, and so advertising is built on that, to foster that belief that the world can do that. So once you know yourself as awareness, which is a joyous thing, there's a deep joy and satisfaction in knowing yourself as awareness, then you don't expect anymore that situations, conditions, or people should make you happy. And the paradox is, when you don't have the expectation that people, situation, or people should make you happy and satisfy you, they are actually quite satisfied.
So that's what's, stress is the universe is not behaving the way I think it should. Our culture seems to foster the desire to judge ourselves, honing in on what is wrong with our body, where we have fallen short, how we are not measuring us up. Many of us have a harsh inner critic, and we say things to ourselves that we would never say to a friend or loved one. How do we learn to turn off this inner judge when it has been harping at us for many decades?
The inner critic, for some people have that very strongly. Other people experience it from time to time. Sometimes the mind is, you feel happy with yourself, and then the next day something else. But it manifests in different ways for different people. For some it's mainly the inner critic, criticizing myself. For others are very critical about other people. Others are very critical about situations they find themselves in. They're always complaining. You may remember from before you awakened spiritually that you always, a lot of the time there was this compulsive mind activity. A lot of that was actually complaining about things and people and where one is and why they should have, why didn't they, they should. Countless stories that and so people are trapped in this torture of their own minds, and the question is how to step out. Anything we say about how to go beyond that presupposes that there's already a minimum of awareness in you from where you can realize what your mind is doing. So that needs to be there. And that is there in all of you and much more, of course. There are still millions of people on the planet. They're also on their way. They don't have yet the minimum awareness. Tell a terrorist or any fundamentalist to be aware of their own thoughts or question them. They would get very angry. And so I don't recommend that. They are not ready for it. So, but you can recognize what your mind is doing to yourself, and you can then, if there is an awareness there, and then you can choose to direct your attention somewhere else. You don't have to follow every thought. You don't have to believe everything you think. Somebody even made that into a bumper sticker. I loved it. You don't have to believe everything you think. And that is an enormous, you can disidentify from your mind and see what the mind is doing. And you can then also, by choice, place your attention on a flower or the sky or anything natural. And you stepped out of. I also recommend for people who are very much burdened by the mind, place your attention into the inner energy field of your body. Feel the aliveness that pervades the entire body. And then you can't think that much anymore. You can't feel both the aliveness within your body and think a lot. So that takes your attention into, wake up in this, I don't know if anybody still experiences that here, you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and you're thinking, and it's not pleasant. It's about my problems. And if you, then suddenly you discover the futility of it, and then you also have at that moment you have a choice. And then you can say, I choose to place my attention on the inner energy field of the body. And from one moment, from 1 minute to the next, you enjoy being awake at night and feel the intense aliveness in every cell of the body. That's one simple way. It's a kind of meditation practice. It's one simple way of taking attention away from thinking when you realize it is not only futile, it's also destructive. So that's and that needs to be then practiced if you have a meditation period. That's wonderful, of course, daily meditation period. But in addition, I always recommend mini meditations throughout the day, which could be a simple thing as taking 2 or 3 conscious breaths while you're waiting for the elevator. Or do something consciously with full attention that usually you do unconsciously, anything that is usually a means to an end, make it into an end in itself. Washing your hands, Be totally present. You're getting out of your mind. Walking down a few steps, be totally present rather than needing to get to the bottom. Be there in every step. So little mini meditations gradually help you to disidentify from the movement of thought. So this is what I would recommend to our questioner and to anybody else who is still burdened by their minds or tortured by their minds.
So, for those of you who like formulas, here's one. STOP. Okay? It's an acronym. S stands for stop. T stands for take 3 deep breaths, as Ekhart just told us to. And while you're taking those 3 deep breaths, smile everywhere in your body, from head to toe. Okay. O stands for observe. Observe your body, as you said. And P stands for proceed with love and kindness. You break the response. Okay, so it's 9 o'clock and our live stream is ending, so I want to bring Wayne. We don't want to lose this opportunity, at least I just have to say. So, I've known Wayne now for 25 years. We've grown up together. He just looks a little older, but we are brothers. Sit down, Wayne.
What am I doing here? It was at the very last observation you made, Deepak, that the word love finally came in. And it's been my journey to learn to come to a new kind of love in my life. I have been reading a great teacher from Bulgaria, whose name was Peter Dunov, of whom Einstein said at the height of his popularity back in the 30s, that the whole world bows before me, and I bow before Peter Dunov. Peter Dunov was a man who talked about a different kind of love. He said there are basically 3 kinds of love. One is human love, and human love is a love that changes and varies. So this is a love that I love you, but you came home late, and you forgot Valentine's Day, so I don't love you so much. And it's constantly changing. I love you, I hate you, and on and on it goes. And then there's a love that he called spiritual love, which is a love that never changes, but it does vary. This is the love that I can only define as the love I have for my children. I have 8 of them, and it really doesn't matter what they do or how they behave, how they conduct themselves. The love is just there. I'm sure the people who've committed some of these atrocities that we've been experiencing the last few months here in America, the mothers of these people still love them. Having 8 children, I know that it varies. Sometimes it's a little stronger than others. But it's always there, and I'm sure you know that with your children, and I see Rita there, as we were talking about her children, your children. And then there's a love that Peter Dunov spoke about, which is a love that he calls divine love. And this is a love that never changes, and this is a love that never varies. And this is a love I aspire to. And the only way I can describe it It's in the Gospel of Thomas, in the Nag Hammadi scrolls that were found in 1945. Jesus is quoted as saying that when you make the two one, then you can enter the kingdom. And the opening line of the Tao Te Ching, a book that I studied and lived and wrote a whole series of essays about, the opening line of the Tao says, "The Tao that can be named is not the Tao." And so I try to imagine a love that Jesus spoke about when you take the two and make it one. So this is a love that has no opposites. So if I were to ask you the word, I said, what is joy? I'm going to say, what is the opposite of joy? Most of you would probably say something like despair or sadness and so on. And then if I ask you to imagine a joy that has no opposite, it's just joy. Or if I were to ask you, what's the opposite of love? We could come up with many antonyms to love. Try to imagine a love that has no opposite. That's all there is. Nothing else can come up. It's, I was thinking when Eckhart was speaking about what is it in us that, you're talking about happiness. And I was thinking, I don't use the word happy either. Shakespeare, in one of his plays, said, I think he said it this way, my crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds, nor Indian stones, nor to be seen. My crown is called content. A crown it is that seldom kings enjoy. And that kind of love is the love I aspire to. Contentment, a love that knows no opposite. Now we're talking up here about being human, and of course we're all in human bodies, and making the two one is almost impossible for us. There's a woman here in the audience who I didn't even know yesterday that I was going to be here today. I just happened to be staying at a hotel nearby. I'm going to see my publisher tomorrow to do some recording, and then I'm going to Denver to do a workshop on the weekend, a writer's workshop. And sitting next to me on the table is Eckhart Tolle, my friend, a man whom I've done a program with recently called The Importance of Being Extraordinary. And of course, to my left is a man who we call each other brothers. We've loved each other very, very much since the early 1990s. Like, I think it was 1990. So the idea that I was going to be here, I didn't even know this was going on. And, and Eckhart said, why don't you come? And here I am. And when I walked in, someone else walked up to me and said, Wayne, what are you doing here? And her name is Anita Morjani. Stand up, Anita. Where are you, dear? Right over there. And Anita, I have written a foreword to a book that of hers called Dying to Be Me. And she, I think she's speaking here. Are you speaking here tomorrow? On Friday here at the Chopra Center? Right, right. So Anita has described what it was like. I mean, she had end-stage lymphoma cancer for 5 years, was down to 82 pounds, had tumors the size of lemons throughout her entire body, and only had a few hours left to live. And became an observer and watched this whole process. And I saw something about her experience on the internet and located her in Hong Kong. She happened to be in Dubai when I found her, and I asked her if she would write her story. And she wrote her story and sent it to me to see if we could publish it. And I sent it back to her and said, it isn't good enough. I want you to go back to the state that you were in when you experience the kind of love I'm speaking about here right now, a love that has no opposites. The words awareness have been tossed around up here, higher awareness. But in that state where there is only one, there is no opposite, whatever you place your attention on, you become. And the only thing that you can feel is a kind of unconditional love. So for me, as I aspire, it is to live a love that has no judgment, no criticism, no condemnation towards any of God's creations. And if we can get to that place, and while we are human, there will still always be the two. The dichotomy will always be there. There will always be the opposite. But in the world that Ekhart describes so beautifully in The Power of Now, we can do this inside here. In here, we don't have to have those judgments, those criticisms, those condemnations. And when we get to that place, because as many of you know, I was diagnosed with leukemia 3 years ago. And I had an experience of having a remote healing from John of God down in Brazil. Many of you, probably everyone in this room knows who that is. And what I thought happened is that these entities entered into my body and they just healed me of leukemia. But that isn't what happened. What happened is that these entities entered my body and they took out fear. The word leukemia is loaded with fear. It isn't about fear of dying. It's such a word. It's just cancer of the blood, you know, everywhere going through your body. It's all of the things about cancer, the cancer that Anita spoke about so brilliantly in her revised edition of, which was done so beautifully. And so it is, I woke up the morning after I had had this remote healing from John of God, and two of my children were there with me on Maui. One of them was my daughter, and I looked at her and I had never seen her the way I had seen her that morning. And I put my arms around her and I just said, I just can't describe to you how much I love you. And I looked at my son and I put my arms around him. And I looked outside. I live on the ocean. The ocean looked different. I just had never seen it before. The palm trees just looked different. The birds, the grass, every stranger that I encountered. In the Course it says there are two ways of reacting. There's love and there's fear. And everything that is love cannot be fear. And everything that is fear cannot be love. So what I would ask you to do is to ask yourself, how much of my life and the decisions that I make are based upon fear? Do you eat the foods that you eat because you're afraid that if you don't, you'll get sick? Or do you do it out of love? This is my body, this is the temple I live in, and I want to treat it that way. Do you drive the speed limit because you love everyone around you and you want them to be safe? Or do you drive the speed limit because you're afraid that if you don't, you're going to get a ticket, so you have a radar detector, and on and on and on it goes. And I could go on with these kinds of, you can almost look at almost every single thing that we do in our life, and so many of them are based on fear. And what Anita's experience was, when she was in the other realm, is that there is no such thing as fear. And cancer, and Deepak and I have done many programs on this. In fact, I remember in London at the Palladium, you and I standing up there one time asking that question, why so much cancer in our world? Why so much illness? Why so much disease? Because, you know, you used to always say it's perfect health, you know, that we don't, our bodies do not have to, there's nothing physically in there that says these bodies have to get older and they have to deteriorate and they even have to die. And if we could get the fear out of our hearts and just come from a place of no judgment, no criticism, no condemnation towards any of God's children, we could live what Shakespeare was speaking about. We could just be content. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And the fear, of course, perpetuates itself through judgments in the mind. And judgments are thoughts that we identify with, that possess us. So the key then is to disidentify from the judgments and to invite the place of no thought into our lives. Ramana Maharshi was asked by a disciple or a visitor in his ashram, how can we know that we are making progress on the spiritual path? How do we know that? And Ramana Maharshi said, the degree of absence of thinking is the criterion for progress on the spiritual path. So now you know whether you're making progress. The degree of absence of thinking is the criterion for progress on the spiritual path. As simple as that.
Well said, well said. One other observation, I've just spent the last 6 months or so in a secluded state of writing every single day. And I've written something called I Can See Clearly Now. And it's just a look back at all of the things that it's like, you know, so there's, look back at, I lived 10 years in an orphanage and what did that result in, and all the way up right through just recently. And I think about how I happened to be here on this stage tonight with two people I admire so much and love so much. And
well, it was a synchronistic event brought you here because
yes.
You were sitting behind the table behind ours last night. It
right.
was just amazing.
Yes, to have you walk. So let's look at, this is just fascinating to me because having just written about all of this, like you were talking about time, both of you were talking about time earlier. And so I like to think that there's this thing called horizontal time. And just imagine a line going across here that represents time. And this is called chronological time, or passing time, or cause and effect time. So what got me here? I made a decision to go down to that restaurant last night to meet with my friend Mark and his daughter. I didn't even want to do that. I didn't. I was going to have them, normally I don't go down into restaurants because I run into people who come and see me. So I was going to just have Mark and talk in the room and order room service, but something said, go down there. So there's cause and effect. So Mark called me. I said, okay, I'm not sure, I don't know. And on how did I happen to get here, even to San Diego, that's a whole other story about why I'm even here. And you think that you're making all of these choices and cause and effect. So I did this, and that caused this, and that caused this. And then we showed up in the lobby, and then some young woman from Russia recognized me and wanted me to be on her TV show that she's doing. She's cooking raw foods. And I said, no, I can't do that. And then we went into the restaurant, and then came over. And I meet Stephen Goldhar, who was the brother of someone that I was in love with for several years back, who I haven't seen in a long time. And I see Greg, who worked at the Omega Institute and whom I've known. And all of these people are showing up, and Eckhardt comes over, and we just had a program that just come out, and all of this stuff is going on. So this caused this, caused this, caused this. And then he said, well, we're having this program tomorrow, would you like to come over? I said, okay, but I'll go in the back, you know, because I don't really want the spotlight to be on me. I want it to be on these two guys. This is, you know, this is their program. So I'll just come in. No, we want you to be in the front. We'd like to have, so here I am in the front. So
then I had the psychic experience.
And Deepak, my psychic brother, who knows everything anyway. So we've got this whole horizontal thing, this caused this, and I could sit down and write them all out, all the reasons how I got here tonight. I'd have to go back to when I was born in 1940, and when my mother was born in 1916, and how her mother, and you know, we could just go all the way up to this moment, and here I am, right? And then there's another kind of time. And this is a time that isn't represented by a horizontal line, but is represented by a vertical line. And this is a vertical line that goes right up to God, all right? And this line is called eternal time, in which there is no time. There's nothing but one. There's only oneness, okay? So everything in eternal time has already been taken care of. Carl Jung said at the same moment that you are a protagonist in your own life and you're making choices, at the very same moment, you're also the spear carrier or the extra in a much larger drama. You are all, he said, doomed to make choices. Now, you want to talk about a paradox, all right? You're doomed, that means it's all taken care of, and within that sense of being doomed, you're making choices. So now we've got this line going straight up, representing eternal time. So my being here right now was already handled. It was handled the moment of my conception. And but the point where this line crosses this line, and that cross is made, at that very point is where you can see both times operating at the same moment. You can literally see that you are making choices and they're already taken care of. Everything is taken care of for you. And so what Deepak and Eckhart have been saying is there is no need to worry about anything. It's all just taken care of. And even your worry is a part of the eternal time thing here. And here was the conclusion. This was from a book called To Know We Are Loved by Rashad Field. Do you know Rashad Field? Do you know that name? He's still alive. He's like To Know We Are Loved. He said, and this is the one I want you to walk out of here with and really think about. Your conception and your death are happening at exactly the same time. It's the same experience. When you get that, you can get back and you can see yourself making all of these decisions, but you can also see that it's all handled for you. And in eternal time, there's no opposite, which means there's no past and there's no future. There's only
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to conclude now this evening with just 3 simple observations out of this whole experience. The first is, every event is a conspiracy of the total universe. So go with the flow, okay? Second is that love actually does heal, and there's a biological reason why it heals. It creates what is called limbic resonance in your brain, and it starts self-repair mechanisms, what in medicine we call homeostasis. It takes you back to your original state, which is well-being. And the third is that the love he was speaking for is really so well articulated in the teaching of Nisargadatta Maharaj,
who you introduced me to and became my teacher, absolutely.
And he says, my love radiates from me like light from a bonfire, focused on none and denied to none. So good night and thank you for coming.